Listeners, you've arrived at the interview portion of the Electric Theater Radio Hour today, and we have a vested interest in this one because I live in District 2, and I'm sitting across from Mr. Craig Brown, and he is running for the representative of District 2, and you know the elections are right around the corner, so this is a good time to get started. We're going to get started right now here in the Mansion by the Sea studios overlooking the beautiful Gulf of Mexico with Craig Brown. And Craig, I have to ask you the most basic question. Why in the world did you decide to do this?
Been involved with community activities and civic and city activities for a number of years, working with the Planning Commission, Landmark Commission, downtown organizations, currently with the Park Board. And I felt that the city needs to rally around a common vision. It's time. I can see that the city of Galveston is right at the beginning of moving ahead on some great activities coming up in the future, and I think now's the time for the city to have a common vision. And I think what I can bring to that is my knowledge of city government, my knowledge of how the process works in the city. I've been involved with that for many years. And I also have quite an appreciation for the neighborhoods. Working with the Planning Commission, Park Board, and so forth, it's come to my realization, and I've had this realization for a little while now, that the backbone of our island, the backbone of our community and our economic growth are the neighborhoods of this island. So because of that, I'm very honored to run for a District 2 position and looking forward to moving these neighborhoods forward.
Well, you know, once I became interested in city politics and city government, I lived in Houston for 35 years. I was one of these guys that thought everything happened at the national level. It really doesn't. It happens at the local level with the city councils and the various boards and commissions. Because of Brenda's involvement in San Jacinto neighborhood and Gain and all that, then I began to realize, no, it's not even that. It is the neighborhoods. It's house by house, block by block. And I've watched this one that we're sitting in right now improve tremendously over the years and all around me. And I saw the people getting involved, and they consequently tend to get involved in their representatives because of, obviously, you can't just do things to your neighborhood or your house without going through the permitting process. And you know, Galveston, I'm a BOI, so Galveston, I know, has a tradition of all these separate little groups. And I liked what you said immediately about the vision. We need a single vision going in a direction that everyone agrees with, and we got to get past all this animosity that's developed. I'm very hopeful when I hear you say things like your introduction there, plus your background and all the various groups you've worked in. You work with very large groups, even bigger than 7 people on the council. So you're used to compromise and consensus and trying to get people to get along. So I think that's going to be a big deal with people. And I think they're very concerned about all that fighting. District 2 is primarily a residential neighborhood. Of course, you know, we got the Seawall, 23rd Street, and some of these other areas. Not a whole lot of commercial stuff here. So with your background in the Planning Commission, you're probably very familiar with the height and density rules better than most people. When a developer comes here, you know, we've had this odd trend where they went to all that trouble to develop the standards and then immediately do an SUP for somebody. Sometimes I call it groping for dollars. A lot of people are very concerned about that, and they want to keep. We went to a lot of trouble to develop that, to have this consistent look here. So what's your take on doing that?
Very familiar with the height and density. I was chairman of Planning Commission when that whole process, we went through that process and came up with the height and density guidelines. The whole purpose of the height and density guidelines, as it applied basically to the seawall, was that we had many different varied guidelines up and down the seawall. We had a lot of exceptions with SUPs, specific use permits and things like that. A lot of variances were being granted. And we needed to have a consistent structure to the development on the seawall. It's probably our most noted and valuable resource on this island is our seawall and our seawall beach. I think the height and density study gives us that structure. I've always been one of those individuals that when a developer comes on this island, we need to have structure on how this developer is to work, what guidelines that they have to fall within, and then hold them to those guidelines. Where I have concerns with development is where developers come on board, they start meeting the guidelines, and then they want to start changing the rules. And so that's what the height and density study was, is to set that structure. There is a specific use component to that height and density guidelines on the seawall. It was designed to give some flexibility for height. There's still a limit. You just can't have any type of height on the seawall. I know recently the City Council have exercised their ability for that specific use permit to give a little variance on height.
Well, now, one of these buildings, Craig, the variance was like 4 or 5 stories. That's not a variance, that's a leap.
Yeah, it's a big leap. It went from 4 or 5 stories to 8 stories or something like that on that.
And then, of course, the edges of the building took up almost the entire lot, so the setback was changed too. The whole thing just flew right in the face of the rules they had, and it was like, then why do we have it if they're just going to ignore it and say, well, we'll do an SUP, do what you want.
And that's true, because that setting those rules not only applies to the developers that they have to follow them, it applies to the city. It applies to the permitting. It applies to the planning department that those rules have to be enforced. And I would agree.
Now, I know we've had this thing about someone, I think Rosen brought up the thing about, not being on certain committees and boards and things if you're running for office. Are you still going to be on the ones you're on now?
Yes, the city ordinance was up to about a year or so ago, or maybe 2 years ago. The city ordinance was that you had to resign from your current appointed position if you were running for a political office. They changed that a year or so ago, and now you can continue to serve on your appointed position while you're running for a particular office, and then, of course, if you're elected, you would resign that position. They did not change that for paid positions.
Are there any?
There are. Well, it was designed so if you're city manager,
oh, I see,
you would have to resign from your city manager position if you were going to run, say, for city council, being a paid position. But for all those appointed positions, the Wharves Board and the Park Board and the Planning Commission and all those others, you can continue to serve.
So I think that's invaluable, and I don't see any conflict if you're a representative and still, because you get so much information from being on those various committees.
Well, you do, and there's so many people on these that are dedicated to all these different commissions and committees that provide a valuable service to those committees. And therefore, if they ran for a position and they did not win that position, it's valuable to still keep their expertise on there.
While we're on the seawall topic, let's do the parking thing. Everybody's going to want to know your take on that. I personally thought the idea of charging for parking on the seawall was fine. It's a park. It has to be maintained. I've lived here all my life. I've seen the restrooms come and go. I've seen the palm trees and the landscaping come and go, the benches. Back in the old days, they had it right. They had little carts they would literally take out into the water so people could change and shower and bring them back. That was kind of neat. However, we went to the deal about, the electronics, doing it on the phone, and I can often see people out my window standing there staring at that phone and cussing at it, trying to get the damn thing to go through. I thought it would have been much simpler to do like Bolivar did and just give everybody a yearly pass. Theirs is like $10 or $15, real cheap. It works just fine, and they have one sticker. I thought the hourly thing was kind of strange. Obviously, meters wouldn't work because of the salt and damage, and a lot of people didn't like the visual. Louis Rosen wrote a glowing editorial about it and somehow changed it into the fact that it had been voted on to get more police protection on the seawall rather than the amenities. And I thought, I must have missed something. Okay, we got it. It was voted in. We have a process of payment for it. There's this little revenue thing about paying the police and their benefits and that we may not have anything left over. Like we often do when we start a program, we find out that, well, we don't even have the money to maintain it and we're losing money. Since it's already in place, can it be fixed? What are your suggestions? And your park board background has got to play into that.
Well, it does. The park board, to give a little background and history into that parking so that you would kind of know where I'm coming from on this. You're right. Of course, the citizens approved parking on the seawall, and they approved parking on the seawall not so much for parking, and there was a lot of people that felt that it was appropriate since people are down here visiting our beaches and potentially littering our beaches, that there needed to be some type of...
Potentially, wasn't that a lovely diplomatic statement?
There was a need to have for a lack of better decision, and it is technically a beach user fee. Mm-hmm. So the parking, according to the state of Texas, is a beach user fee on the seawall. So there was a need to have that, but there was a need also to have amenities on the seawall that you've already mentioned, to have nice restrooms, to have freshwater showers, to have security, to have extra cleanliness, to have landscaping and lighting and on the seawall. So the citizens, and in my opinion, I think it was a good vote to go ahead and approve that, and I voted for that. The concern that has arisen and that the mechanism that has been developed to provide parking on the seawall, in my opinion, is not a balanced business decision. What you have now is you have a lot of expenses to fund police cars, to fund police officers, to manage this parking system. And you have a lot of expenses here that are not directly covered by the income that's coming in from parking. This parking system is subsidized right now. It was subsidized from day one, and it's subsidized for this coming year in the budget with the city. If you take the subsidy monies that are coming from the hot tax, and these subsidy monies are coming from the hot tax to fund police officers and other related activities with the parking system, you put those subsidies in with the expenses, this project is losing money. There's no money. Now, yes, there may be money if you don't include those subsidies. But when you have a business, you have to take all of your expenses that are involved because those subsidies are coming out of the income that this city has.
Sure.
Even though it's hot tax money, that hot tax money can be used for other things that brings other revenue into this city. And therefore, you're taking revenue from this city, and if you're going to use revenue, you've got to look at the total expense item. And this system, the way it's structured right now, is not a balanced business principle. It's not a balanced business plan. I think it can be changed. I think that there can be things done where the way the parking is enforced with meter individuals or parking ambassadors on that seawall could probably monitor this. They could issue tickets even if that needs to be done without all of the excess expense that's going with the police officers at this point in time. And I think you could bring that back into balance again. I think if you did that, you'd have to look at the business model, but there probably would be monies then that would be net profits if you could pare down your expenses here. And I think those net profits then could be leveraged with some type of grants and so forth that would make amenities on this seawall a reality that would actually come from the net profits of the parking system. I think one thing we need to look at too is this sunsets when you voted for this approximately 2 years ago or longer than that, 2.5 years ago, it was to sunset in 7 years. So in about 4.5 years or so, this is to sunset. I think it's time now that we start looking at where we're going after that does sunset. I would hate for this community to get to a point that shortly before it sunsets that we go, well, I'm not sure what we're going to do with this, and we really don't know, so we're going to have to just continue this until we can figure it out. I think we need to really look at what parking means for us on this island. I think there's a lot of other approaches rather than actually parking, charging for cars sitting on the south side of the seawall that we need to look at. I don't know if they're going to be viable, but a lot of other coastal cities utilize public-private partnerships to provide parking garages that are contiguous with their beaches, and I think we could do that here.
I know you're real familiar with the downtown parking situation, which appears to be generating a considerable revenue. I know a lot of it's going in. I think y'all just were doing the Wayfinder sign. You were talking about lighting and things that were coming from that. That's obviously working. I'm real curious to see as well, what did you think about the proposal that the city take it over rather than outsourcing it to the meter people?
Well, I think downtown, and this would apply to any program, and this would apply to the seawall. If the city feels that they can take over parking downtown and do it more efficiently, they can provide a better quality of service and they can give more net revenue, then I'd like to see that business plan. As a building owner downtown and as a citizen of Galveston, let the city show their plan and show how this is going to work. Right now we have a system downtown. It may not be perfect. It needs to be tweaked. It needs to be upgraded. But we have a system that is giving a net profit for marketing downtown, as you mentioned, on our wayfinding signage, and we're getting ready now to put other signage and vehicular signage and pole banners, lighting on some of the streets with historic type lighting. So we're getting ready to do those things from parking revenue downtown. If the city has a better plan, then let's see that plan. We sometimes jump to conclusions and say we can do things better, and then when you put the pencil to the paper, it doesn't work out.
I think they looked at how much revenue it was generating and thought, wow, why can't we be getting all of it instead of paying some of it? Do we have the resources there? Is it capable of taking on yet another management responsibility? Many people question that.
And rightly so, And if it's designed, if the downtown parking was designed to pay more for more police officers, I think the city would be very concerned about that, and rightly so. Police officers needless to say, they do a wonderful job. But is that the role for the police officers, and should the parking, a major amount of the revenue parking, should it go to pay those police officers when it can be, those duties can be performed by other individuals?
It's kind of like having the senior management of the Moody Foundation sweeping the floors. I don't know that that's cost effective with all those benefits and salaries. And I think the people they have downtown, I see them all the time. I think it's running fine. And I just wonder that in the course of, hey, let's get all the money and do it ourselves, we might wind up, and there has been this proclivity to get the police department to do it, and you get like a $90,000 a year guy with a lifetime pension into the next 400 years, and he's writing tickets. And it's like, I don't know, that seems strange to me. When you mentioned parking, I thought about where my store is, and I get the red zone there because of the trolley tracks. Well, now you know that one's come back. And with your experience, you probably know far more about it than me. There were times I did take the trolley from UTMB when I lived downtown, and the only problem with that was usually after a test, and that thing was such a rough ride. I wanted to die by the time I made it back. Could it work? Could it actually make enough money to sustain itself?
So far, the preliminary analysis of that, and let me say about the rail trolley first before I give some thoughts about the analysis of it. The rail trolley, needless to say, a lot of us loved the rail trolley. It was very nostalgic. It brought an ambiance to Galveston that a lot of people appreciated, and I did too. The concern with the rail trolley was that, for whatever reason, it never was a transportation system. It was more of an entertainment for people to ride. It didn't sometimes have a definite schedule. You couldn't rely upon it. Sometimes it ran, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah.
And the problem with the rail trolley, two other things is, needless to say, being on rails, it can only go where the rails are. And secondly, when a storm would hit, you can't move those trolleys off the island. They have to go to the trolley barn, which flooded in Ike, and now we lost the trolleys. But getting back to the pro forma, Even the Goodman Corporation, who has come up with funding for capital expenditures to refurbish and to bring the trolleys back, their preliminary pro forma is showing that the operation would run at a deficit. It's run at a deficit ever since it's been here, and it will continue to run at a deficit. The two questions that need to be answered in my mind, if you want the rail trolley back, who's going to pay for this deficit? Who's going to subsidize these trolleys? Are they worth subsidizing to the point that they reach a point financially that they're worth subsidizing? If they needed to be subsidized $600,000 a year, would that be worth it, or would you reach a point over $100,000 they would be subsidized? And then if they are to be subsidized, where is that money coming from?
Right.
Who's going to pay that bill?
How do you encourage people to use them for transportation? And we've got problems with the bus system.
You're exactly right, and that's the other issue, is who's going to run the trolley. There has been talk that the park board would possibly assume that. The park board has never formally looked at that issue because that's not been formally presented to us. Whoever runs these rail trolleys, it's a big enterprise to run and make it run right. And then if that person or that organization that runs it, are they going to be responsible for the deficit that would probably incur?
Well, I didn't have a great knowledge of it. I know when we had visitors, everybody wanted to write it, but I thought it was a problem of management because no one knew when they were running, no one knew where to catch them, it wasn't advertised much, and frankly, where the park board is these days in the last couple of years with you and my good friend Kelly DeShawn, brilliant woman, I would turn over almost everything to the park board at this point, which nobody would have said 10 years ago. We just came back from New Orleans a few months ago, and those pot trolleys are packed.
They are. And in New Orleans, when you think of New Orleans and you see those trolleys, they bring back a feeling about New Orleans.
Yep.
The other issue with the trolleys is rubber tire trolleys.
How about those?
Can we bring rubber tire trolleys to the island? Can they be funded in
Well, we had some, didn't we?
We did at one point. And can we bring rubber tire trolleys to the island? Possibly even have rubber tire trolleys on the same route that the rail trolleys are. They can be, then they're flexible. They can be moved around at times when there's high traffic areas, moved on different routes. The rubber tire trolleys can be moved out of harm's way if a storm comes. There is a big movement now to look at rubber tire trolleys. Do we need to have rail trolleys to really provide that ambiance that we want, or can we get those with rubber tire trolleys and really have a more flexible transportation system? And I think that's what a lot of groups now are leaning towards, is looking at the rubber tire trolleys.
Well, and that's a good idea because most people don't really pay much. They've got the things on the bottom that look like, you just don't hear the click, 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 but I'm sure they could put a little box in there that makes railroad noises. You hear those all the time. That, of course, brings me, we're still downtown at the moment, even though that you're not the rep there, but you're kind of an expert. It's kind of depressing sometimes to be living here a block from the seawall and look out there and it's packed. Then I go down to my gallery on Post Office Street where three's a crowd. Except for Art Walk, it's pretty grim down there. But boy, they just don't seem to know we're there. I did notice, though, in the last few months, and you know, Craig, I didn't just stand there and complain. Like, I was there 2 weeks and realized what was going on. Immediately made rack cards to put on the seawall at the hotel. Say, hey, there's a downtown, and we're that other street. Post office is great. Great shops, great restaurants. The Wayfinder signs went in, but of course we still need something on Broadway. The Alyssa has a big anchor. We know all about the Grand, and we really don't know that there's a downtown. It's something that's readable. I thought some signage on Broadway, but I do think when the park board, again, the park board, seawall signage, cruise ship. When they did the cruise ship things, I started noticing immediately the street traffic improved somewhat. How do we get all those people that come to the seawall and let them know there's a downtown
You're exactly right. The park board has discussed that issue, and we feel there's many solutions to that, but two of the primary ones is park board has to make those individuals, those tourists that we host down here, aware of what's downtown. We have started doing that. We are starting to do that more, and with our media, audio and visual media that we're doing, we have billboards. We just put up right after Christmas a new billboard on 61st that directs individuals downtown. We have it on our wayfinding signage, not only downtown, but on the seawall, we have downtown highlighted. And the other issue is we have to have, and this is something that the park board is looking at coming up here, a tourism transportation system on this island. We need to have a very easy way to move individuals around from these different tourism economic centers on the island. The seawall, downtown, Moody Gardens, around the Pleasure Pier area. We need to have a tourism system, transportation system.
Are you talking about vehicles?
Yes.
Like back to the rubber tire trolley
That is
thing.
exactly right. We need to look at that, and the park board, that's one of our goals for 2014, to look at that. Because that needs to be there. If you're at the Pleasure Pier and you could get something and you could go downtown, go to the restaurants there, go over to the Grand to see a show, and you knew what time that trolley would be coming or that vehicle would be coming down.
Well, that's what we did when we were in New Orleans.
Exactly.
Are we going to lose you on the park board if we do this?
We have. Let me say this about the park board. We have 9 individuals on that park board that are. It's a hardworking board.
Yeah.
We have unbelievably talented individuals. As you mentioned, with Kelly Deshawn as our executive director, Melody Smith, Meg Winchester, Peter Davis running our beach patrol, Mario Rabago running our beach maintenance. We have individuals there that, to be very honest, we have a very stable group that will continue this progression.
Great staff. I can't say enough about y'all. That's why I said maybe we should have a mayor of the park board and just run the whole city. I would turn anything over to that group to manage. You know about downtown.
Oh, goodness,
yeah.
yes.
Now, a lot of people think that we've been a little overly generous in staffing and other things. How would you handle opposition from the police department regarding reduction in staff, be it from changes to seawall parking or some other event necessitating a reduction in force? Now, we went through that, back when LeBlanc was here. Then we kind of started edging it back up again. And now, certainly we have times when we have 100,000 people on the island. Well, of course, you got to staff up for that. So kind of give me your general philosophy on this whole thing about, do we have the correct number, and how do you handle that?
That's a question that I would be honest in saying I don't have the answer what the correct number is at this point. I think that's something that I will have a better understanding of as I learn about these issues more and more. I would say this about the police department. They have a very difficult job on this island. This island not only has a population of 49,000 or 50,000 individuals here, but we brought in last year almost 6 million tourists to Galveston Island. And then we have events like Motorcycle Rally and Mardi Gras that strain the entire security system on this island. They do a wonderful job, and for me at this point, with my lack of knowledge on the specifics, I would be hard pressed to say no, we have too many police officers, because I don't know. I do know this, that when you speak about the police, you many times hear about their pension plan and their pension fund, and if that needs to be, and a lot of monies are going into that. The police officers put a percentage of their salaries into that, and the city of Galveston puts a percentage into that and matches that. The issue, though, is that it has a bearing on the budget for the system, but the solvency of that plan and to protect these police officers that put their money into this plan needs to be looked at also. We need to have a plan that is solvent, that protects the investment of these police officers, but we also need to have some type of plan that is supportive of the finances of the city. Now, what the solution to that is, I don't know right now. But I will look into that, and I will have a better understanding.
Well, I mentioned it because it's not necessarily a critical issue now, but it's likely to come up because there is all that talk about the seawall thing, and then if they do the downtown parking thing. Now, that kind of brings me back to the hot tax. Where we're sitting right now, many of my neighbors have turned their houses into weekly rental properties. And I understand the park board, again, is looking into auditing this and seeing who's paying and who's not and how it's going and everything. What's your feeling on that?
Hot tax, tourism is right now on Galveston Island is one of the top economic engines, close to 33%. And pretty soon, probably close to 40% of all jobs on the island will be tourism-oriented. Hot tax is that tax, that hotel tax, that is charged 15% on every bill, is charged for people spending the night in these hotels. And that is what helps fund the park board and the city and their, what they call trickle-down monies.
So I've gone to those meetings, and I see those people vying for their cut of it, They do. And so hot tax is a very important revenue stream on this island. The hot tax with the vacation rental situation, the city hired a city auditor here about a year and a half ago. And the city auditor, Mr. Glenn Bulgarini, has really done and spent a lot of time in auditing these hotels and some vacation rentals to determine if the proper amount of hot tax is being paid, with the thought that there is some unpaid hot tax out there that needs to be collected and brought into the city. The park board does not collect hot tax. We only are a recipient of hot tax that is given to us by the city. So we're not involved with that collection process. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misread the article. I thought the park board was talking about looking into this.
It's the city of Galveston. Now, the city of Galveston did come to the park board meeting, and you're correct, last meeting, and requested that they are thinking about hiring another individual or company to audit this hot tax, and that they would request that the park board shares a half of that salary of that individual.
Okay, well, then I wouldn't
to do that.
totally
And so you're
off,
exactly right. The park board, and by the way, we're looking at that issue at this point and very open to discuss that with the city. But the hot tax, when it comes to vacation rentals, there are certain vacation rentals, sometimes by accident, that are not paying their fair share of the hot tax. If we have a rule here that hot tax has to be paid, and there are individuals or groups that are not paying that hot tax, then they need to do so. It's not fair to those other groups and organizations that are paying their fair share.
Well, and that kind of leads into the big vacation rental controversy from the last few months, like in Colony Park, where you've got like 16 people staying in a house, partying, running up and down the streets in their cars and making noise and all this. That one's a nest. I mean, how in the world, what could city council do to regulate that and yet not squash it?
And I think that the organizations, GARM, which is there mainly on West End, that
GARM.
the Galveston Association of Rental Managements or so forth, something like that. They are on the West End. They have structure. Many of those vacation rentals on the West End are members of GARM. They have rules for their individuals that are participants with GARM. They have even security force that will go out and monitor those homes if there's a complaint over a weekend or an evening for those homes. So there is a new organization that has just started downtown on the East End here that is working with vacation rentals also, very similar to GARM.
Well, so is that something the city council even needs to fool with, or could it be done by neighborhood associations?
It possibly could be done by neighborhood associations. The concerns is, and this is the way every issue is you have some vacation rental owners that won't abide by what the homeowners association or the rental organization's request, and there's no teeth in that. There's no way to enforce that. I think there are certain issues with these vacation rentals that the city could assist some of these groups in giving more teeth to, specifically the number of people in a home, specifically the amount of cars and where these cars park.
Oh, yeah.
Those types of things. But to come down and to try to structure a broad encompassing law to try to control all of these groups, I think they're being controlled fairly well, but the city could assist them probably better.
Well, now, you've talked a great deal about budget, finances, pretty much up on my next question. A couple months ago, Marie Robb brought up the misappropriation of funds deal about the West End thing, of course. Now, apparently, it did reveal a certain amount of sloppy bookkeeping. Mr. Kovacs said, well, no, it was just a wrong entry. Nothing was blah, blah, blah. But we got into kind of another pie fight on that one. The auditor did, in an article last month, I believe he said, boy, there's stuff that hadn't been entered in a couple of years and this and that. So are you going to kind of look at that sort of thing? And I'm sure you're pretty familiar with it.
Well, I am, and that has to be looked at. The trust of the community for city government is based on a lot of things, but one of them is that the city government is meeting their fiduciary responsibility of managing and accounting for and auditing these monies properly. And that needs to be cleaned up. That needs to be completely looked at. There needs to be a transparency. This has to take place in a transparent fashion.
Executive session. Executive session. We're on a time clock.
It has to be in a transparent fashion. We at city government, the city council members, all we are is a liaison for the citizens out here. And we don't have the right, unless there's specific certain issues that legally require non-transparency or an executive session. And 99% of these issues, the best way to do this is be transparent, because the citizens out here need to know what's going on, and they have probably ideas of how to rectify that might even be better than they're coming up with the city level.
Well, you made noises there like you actually intend to represent your district.
Well, I do.
We're not seeing that a lot these days.
I firmly believe that with some of the changes that will happen coming up here with the new elections, I firmly believe that we can get together a city council that has a common vision of what we're for, not what we're against, but what we're for, and have a common vision for this city and working together. You know, it's not getting everybody necessarily on the same page, because that's why you have diversified areas of the city, and that's why you have different city council members. But it's respecting everybody else's opinion. Because I tell you, I've learned a long time ago that just because someone has an opinion different than mine doesn't mean that mine's necessarily correct and theirs is wrong. We have to have a respect for each other's opinion. We need to have a respect for each other's thoughts. You lay your ideas out there, you vote, and then you have the trust in the group that you move ahead with the majority findings of that group, and you support that. And that's the way this government needs to work. That's the way we work at the park board. We're not on page with everything that we vote on.
Yeah, but at least y'all are in the same book.
We're in the same book.
In the same library.
Same library, but you have to have respect for those other individuals, because compromise is part of the name of the game on this. In the compromise solution, many times is the better solution. Not always, but many times the better solution. What is that old adage that if both sides don't feel like they really got what they wanted, then that's probably the best solution.
That's right. That's a compromise. you're coming into a situation where we still have a lot of interim people. We've got a city attorney that a lot of people are wondering if she's qualified, and even is Kovacs out of his element? Is maybe Galveston a little bit too big? How do you feel about our current staff? Because you're going to be working with them now if you win.
They're brand new. Michael Kovacs, Mr. Kovacs is city manager. Dorothy Palumbo is attorney. There have been some things going on over there that makes me, as many citizens, wonder about what's going on with the management. I think this, as a city council person, that is where I will sit down, not on my own, but you can do this through the proper process at city council and see what type of individuals these are and if they're up to the challenge of where we want to move ahead. So those individuals, I would just develop that line of communication with as a city council member, and we need to see if they're up to the task.
Sure.
I would say this, that sometimes individuals, when they're functioning in an environment that is somewhat dysfunctional, then you get a lot of dysfunctionality among a number of individuals. But if you can provide an environment that functions in a professional and a respectful way, I think a lot of these individuals will rise to the occasion and probably show us things that we never knew they could do.
You know, I've seen situations when I used to be a manager and I'd take over a department and people would tell me, oh, so-and-so's worthless or whatever. Well, no, I will always give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'll encourage them in every way I can to perform. If for some reason they just can't do it, then we look at a transfer, or possibly they just have to go. But I've run across people before that I was told, oh, no, they're no good, and they turned out to be superior performers. Their environment was not conducive to them giving their best.
Correct.
And sometimes
Correct.
that's simple leadership.
That is.
And setting an example. Now, right now, we've got, like I said, we've got some real leaders on there, but it's clouded with all this noise and everything. And it's very possible that could be part of it. Or where do you think we're going to wind up on this housing thing? Now that we've got the suit and everything, I guess nobody's going forward on anything. And of course, I couldn't help but laugh when I read that. I think the GLO said, well, no, it was the Galveston Housing Authority that came up with this plan. We didn't come up with any plan. And it seemed to me that they said, you're going to do it this way, period. Really, it's our city, and I think we should have more say in how it works. What do you think about that, and where do you think it's going to wind up?
I wish that I don't know where that's going to wind up, and I'm sure if anybody knows where that's going to wind up. I would say this about it, that be it that you were in favor of the approach that has been followed here for so many years after Ike concerning the housing issue or not, there has been a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of money spent at the city level trying to change the path of that. To date, that has somewhat been very unsuccessful in changing that path. Where we're going to head with these new suits and things like that, I don't know. I would say this, though. If this is a effort, if you're for or against it, if this is something that the housing issue has come to the point that it is, and we have to do it in a certain way, two things. Galveston has to have a say in that. And second of all, we need to structure that to be in the best interest of our community. And we need to put our energies that way. And if we reach that point, in some people's minds, we haven't reached that point yet, where we know we have to move ahead with this, and other people, they feel we have. But when we get to that point, we need to move ahead and put our energies now into making that the best it is for this group in this community.
Now, at the very beginning, you mentioned that one of the reasons you were running for this office is that you wanted to bring a vision of moving forward. We have become experts at going in a circle or even backwards. Give me a closing statement about what Craig is going to bring to the party.
What I think I can bring is, I think I can bring a degree of professionalism. I think I can bring a large degree of open communication, not only with the constituents of District 2 and the citizens here, but with all phases of the island. and an appreciation and respect for everybody's feelings and viewpoints. We all are after the same thing. We may differ on a lot of different things, but we're after a quality living environment here on this island that would be good for not only ourselves, but our children and grandchildren. We're after so many common goals, and I think what we need to do is continue that communication. I'm going to be a very open city council member. I'm going to be constantly communicating. I'm going to be constantly moving the city and trying to work with other city council members to move us in a common goal. And I think we can reach that point. This is not something that is unattainable. A lot of times people say, oh my goodness, it's going to take so much to change the way we've been moving to this point that it's going to take years to do that. I don't think that's true. I think this can be done in a very short, relatively short period of time. But we're going to have to work together on that. I think we can, because we're ultimately after the same thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank
Great
you,
job.
George. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Craig, let us know, how do the voters and people that want to listen to you find out more about you? What do they need to do to get in touch?
I have a phone number. They can call me, 409-789-0744. I will answer those calls. I will return your call. So feel free to call me at any time on that. We do have a mailbox, Post Office Box 952, Galveston 77553. And we are just bringing up a website also, Craig Brown for District 2. And so will be the website.
Is that .com?
I think it's .com. We're just
Okay.
putting the final touches on it right now.
Well, if they Google it, it'll come up if it's .com.
It's Craig Brown for District 2, and it should be .com. And we have the cell number again that I will answer, 409-789-0744.
There you go. That's that communication you were talking about.
Correct. Thank you.